Tonight, day 2, a peek at the food at this year's Fall Fair in Dawson Creek. Strike looming, a look at how job action at Air Canada would affect the Peace region, and water concerns. Dawson Creek eyes a $100 million pipeline project. Well, good evening and thank you very much for joining us. We begin tonight with day 2 of the Dawson Creek exhibition and Stampede. From bull riding to the Midway, everyone has their own favorites, but whatever you prefer, it's the food that everyone can agree on. Noah Abel has more on the menu and what's being served at this year's Fall Fair.
Today's day 2 of the Dawson Creek exhibition and Stampede, and we're checking out food vendors. This year's event features goodies from old favorites to exciting new vendors.
Try that!
And new to the fall this year is Magic Poppins. JC Kavanaugh is happy to see her chips already a hit with the kids.
I love when they come by and they're like, Mom, these are them, these are them. Yeah, so I try to always give the little kids samples.
Kavanaugh sells chips made out of potato, wheat, and corn flour, and she offers a mix of flavors good for any taste.
Why not just do a grab-and-go chip? So I did pre-seasoned. So I have salt and vinegar, dill pickle, sour cream and onion, parm and garlic, sweet and sassy, which is a cinnamon sugar.
An old favorite of Stampede goers is Hawaiian shave ice. Alan Cormillo sells a lot of different varieties. Cormillo says shave ice has become a favorite over the past few years.
I've had kids that have started this big and now they're this big bringing their own kids to me. They are our bread and butter to our business.
Cormillo says the Dawson Creek exhibition is one of his best shows of the year.
Number one flavor at every show is blue raspberry. Cherry is a close second.
Another new vendor excited about being at this year's Stampede is Rowdy Fry Company. Sean Shepard says from burgers and poutine to pulled pork, it's a big opportunity for the company.
We're crazy excited. It's supposed to be a make or break it for us type year.
Shepard says they came ready for a busy weekend hoping to feed thousands of fairgoers.
We actually brought a 25 cube freezer with extra fries, hot dogs, burgers, everything just to make sure that we don't have to stop to serve the customer.
Local MLA Larry Neufeld has a stand at this year's exhibition in Stampede. He says the food fair has something for everyone.
The opportunity to sample so many different types of food and so many different menus in one place is amazing.
Organizers are expecting over 20,000 people to visit the Stampede ground this year. They say bring your appetite and your sense of adventure. Noah Abel, CJDC-TV News, Dawson Creek.
Air Canada flight attendants have voted overwhelmingly in favor of strike action. However, no one is walking off the job just yet. But if they do, some good news for those traveling out of the North Peace Regional Airport. The union, representing over 10,000 flight attendants at Air Canada, says its members have voted 99.7% in favor of strike action. The earliest potential strike date is August the 16th. The airline says flights in and out of Fort St. John and Grand Prairie will not be affected. That's because those flights are operated by Jazz Aviation. In a statement to CJDC, Air Canada says it's eager to resume discussions which the union had suspended during the vote. The airline adds it's determined to reach a fair and equitable deal. Well, the city of Dawson Creek is looking for an alternative water source in the midst of a years-long drought. City officials are looking at a $100 million pipeline project to send water from the Peace River to Dawson Creek. 18 months ago, the Kiskatinaw River froze, making it impossible to draw water from. Since then, the city has been assessing various options. The river levels are currently at a historic all-time low. The mayor of Dawson Creek says he's hoping the province scraps the environmental assessment for the project. Darcy Dober saying that process alone can take 3 to 5 years. We'll call it a salmon surprise. The number of sockeye returning to the Fraser River this summer has far exceeded estimates. The abundance means some First Nations have been allowed to harvest for food, social, and ceremonial purposes. And as Ben Milger reports, commercial fishers are hoping they too will get a chance to reel in some sockeye.
Sockeye salmon have sustained Indigenous people for thousands of years. In recent decades, the abundance has not been what it once was.
I would have 20 cases of sockeye for the winter. I'd have 40 or 50 sockeye in the deep freeze. And now I'm lucky if I make a case of fish last 2 years because it's so rare to get.
So far, close to 750,000 have already been counted swimming upstream past Mission. 10 times what was expected.
Oh, beautiful sockeye.
Some BC First Nations now have the green light to harvest for food, social, and ceremonial purposes. The fish will be distributed to their members, who will smoke or can most of it.
Strengthens the family ties and work collectively on fish. It is a lot of fun. It's great. It's hard work, but it's a lot of fun, and it strengthens our communities and our nations.
Commercial operators would also like a chance to catch Fraser River sockeye for the first time in 6 years.
We've had record test fishing for July since records were kept on test fishing.
6 million sockeye are now expected to return, and that number could go up. But commercial operators don't think they'll be allowed to land any of them. Why aren't you more optimistic that commercial fishers might get a chance?
Well, unfortunately, they're still managing under a low run scenario that they modeled in the wintertime.
According to the Watershed Watch Salmon Society, despite the incredible numbers, sockeye returning to spawn face an uncertain fate thanks to low river levels and high water temperatures.
There's estimates now this year that somewhere between 30 and 50% of the returning fish could die en route to their spawning grounds.
The Pacific Salmon Commission and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans will have to consider all of those factors before deciding whether to launch this fleet of commercial boats. Ben Milger, CTV News, Steveston.
As many of our viewers know, there are many perks to rural living, including a sense of community, but that culture is slowly being threatened. Now some rural communities are taking issue with a recent change by Canada Post. The iconic red flag that goes up and down when there's mail inside the box is apparently no longer part of the carrier's job description. Canada Post says the flag is not meant to inform customers that they have mail. The Crown Corporation says, in fact, it's to let the carrier know there's outgoing mail to collect. Well, many rural residents only check their box when they see the flag and say, the sudden change doesn't make any sense.
And it seems a little bit odd that given it a time when Canada Post is struggling to survive and wanting large raises and wanting to gain more of the market share, that they're going to offer less service and less convenience to the public when they deliver their mail.
This all comes less than a week after unionized Canada Post workers rejected their employer's latest and final offer. A special court proceeding on a proposed Alberta separation referendum question began in Edmonton today. Alberta's chief electoral officer referred the question to the courts last week. Now he's asking a judge to determine whether it violates the Constitution, including treaty rights. The question is, do you agree the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province in Canada? Well, the Premier and Justice Minister have criticized that referral to the courts. They say the question should be approved and only face judicial scrutiny after it receives a majority vote. Prime Minister Mark Carney is hoping a meeting with Métis leaders today will spell relief, not more consternation. The group is sharing concerns over the government's Bill C-5, which fast-tracks major projects, but there's division within the ranks. The delegation from BC wasn't even invited to attend in person, only as an online observer. CTV's Abigail Beeman has more from Ottawa on how the meeting went.
Thank you for coming. Prime Minister Mark Carney said the government is listening to Métis people now, citing their work creating original trade networks across the land.
Part of a process of creating new trade networks, new forms of commerce in Canada, both with full recognition this time, full recognition of Métis contributions and full Métis access.
Métis leaders positive after the meeting. Summer summits held as a response to friction over the rushed passage of C-5, the Building Canada bill, not as much from Métis as other Indigenous groups, but Métis organizations certainly have questions.
As long as, the Canada is going to consult with us and make sure that our Indigenous rights are protected, we're ready to go.
This was a great start, and we need to have more dialogue like this.
We can't go there if Ontario is in that room.
Meanwhile, the Manitoba Métis Federation refused to attend, saying Wednesday Carney invited what it considers to be illegitimate organizations.
If you want to come and sit down with my cabinet and a government-to-government relationship, we will meet. But if you want to insult us, then we'll see each other in a different political realm in the future.
We've had good engagement directly with the Manitoba Métis, and that will continue.
The Métis Nation of Ontario says Manitoba is putting forward a new and false narrative. Meanwhile, the Métis Nation of British Columbia also refused attendance because it was only invited as an online observer. This was the last of 3 summer summits the Prime Minister held with Indigenous groups, First Nations, Inuit, and now Métis. Carney says the goal is to have both the Major Projects Office and the Indigenous Advisory Council up and running by Labor Day. Abigail Beeman, CTV News, Ottawa.
And Ottawa has said that Bill C-5 is in response to Donald Trump's trade war. Well, that trade war has apparently soured Canadians' appetite for travel to the United States. New data showing the number of vehicles crossing from BC into Washington state has plummeted to a figure not felt since the outbreak of COVID-19. The Border Policy Research Institute in Bellingham found the decline began back in February at the Pacific Highway and Blaine border crossings. Since then, figures show a whopping 50% drop in April and a further 29% decline last month. The director of the Institute says this recent drop has only been experienced post 9/11 and in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have multiple aspects to this. There's some baseline situations like a weak Canadian dollar that in our region always does impact cross-border travel, but certainly I think the overriding factor is the Canadian pushback to crossing the border for reasons around safety concerns, around perceptions of what's happening at the border, and then of course just boycotting the US overall.
Now, the latest economic impact research from the World Travel and Tourism Council projects the United States is on track to lose $12.5 billion in international tourism spending this year alone. And Donald Trump is bragging today about the billions of dollars every month that will flow into U.S. coffers as more than 60 countries feel the pain of today's latest round of reciprocal tariffs. But what Trump isn't saying is that it's the import companies and the U.S. consumer that's being left to pick up the hefty tab. We're already seeing backlash in the United States and elsewhere, with countries pushing back and moving away from trading with the states. Mike LeCouture has the latest on the impact on both sides of the border.
Yes, we're having discussions with the Americans.
Prime Minister Carney wouldn't say when he'll next speak to U.S. President Donald Trump, but Ontario's Premier didn't mince words when asked about how Canadians see the American leader.
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada.
In an interview on CNN, Doug Ford tried to explain to Americans that these tariffs are hurting them.
When you see 37,000 Americans have lost their jobs, that can't pay the rent or can't pay a mortgage, put food on their table, and this is just going to grow even more.
A new report from Yale University shows the current tariffs will hit American consumers.
We're expecting an adjustment of about over $2,000 to, their real household income and sort of purchasing power.
The impact could be felt in back-to-school shopping, as the tariffs will make shoes 40% more expensive, and the price of other clothes will rise by 38% because of import duties. Meantime, the impact on Canada's economy is being measured by the Royal Bank. In June, 92% of Canadian exports crossed into the U.S. duty-free because they are covered under the current trade agreement, leaving 8% subject to punishing tariffs.
That portion of trade is unfortunately facing an average tariff rate of 30%.
Still, the overall impact on the Canadian economy is relatively small at this point, but sectors like steel and aluminum continue to suffer. While campaigning ahead of his by-election in Alberta, Pierre Poilievre criticized Carney's handling of the trade talks.
He's been bending over backwards for the president and so far has gotten nothing in return.
Now, Prime Minister Carney continues to say he will speak to the U.S. president when it makes sense, but there is no clear indication of exactly when that could be. Mike LeCouture, CTV News, Ottawa.
All right, please do stay tuned. Noah will be right back after the break with weather.